The morning light slipped between the buildings of Elmsworth City, casting long shadows over the pavement. Among the quiet rhythm of footsteps and murmurs, a young woman named Clara Wynne moved with urgency, her resume, creased and slightly damp from her grip, clutched tightly in one hand. Every heartbeat reminded her she was late. Not fashionably late, but desperately late, for a job that could change the course of her life. "If I don't make it today," she whispered to herself, "I might have to start auctioning off body parts. A kidney, maybe. Do they even take used ones?" Her attempt at humor didn't calm the storm inside. She turned the corner and finally caught sight of the tall glass tower that housed the company she'd dreamt of working for. Just a few more steps, just enough time to fix her appearance, to look like someone who had it all together. That's when she noticed it. A luxury car, black as midnight, parked quietly near the entrance. Its windows, tinted and polished to perfection, reflected the world like a flawless mirror. Clara slowed down, then stopped in front of the passenger side window. She gave herself a once-over and sighed. Her blouse had shifted awkwardly during her rush. In one fluid, practiced motion, she began to adjust her bra beneath the fabric, hoping to regain some semblance of composure. She moved quickly, glancing around, thinking no one was watching. Then came the lipstick, applied with sharp focus, the way a soldier prepares before battle. She smiled at her reflection, but the relief was short-lived. A piece of lettuce, bold and unapologetic, clung to her front teeth. Clara stared, horrified. "Oh, come on," she muttered, trying to flick it away with her finger. The image she saw in the glass was almost laughable. A young woman, flustered and frantic, making faces at herself just minutes before a life-altering moment. And then the mirror moved. The window, silent and smooth, rolled down. She froze, hand halfway to her mouth, breath caught mid-chest. Inside the car sat a man, impeccably dressed, composed, and unfairly handsome. His eyes met hers without a trace of judgment, only quiet amusement, as though he had been watching the scene unfold like a private film. "Would you like a proper mirror?" he said gently, "or is the lettuce part of the charm?" Clara blinked. Her instincts screamed for her to run. Instead, she drew a shaky breath, wiped her hand on her slacks, and replied with a faint smile, "If you find my pride lying around somewhere, do let it know I miss it." The man chuckled, but not unkindly, just enough to soften the air between them. "Well," he said, "it looked like the window made the first move. You just responded." "It's not something I usually do," Clara said, heat rising in her cheeks. "Fixing my bra in public, I mean, or making friends with my own reflection. Sounds like a bit of bad luck. A broken mirror, an ambush by salad. Maybe the universe is having fun today." She glanced at her watch and gasped. The time had slipped right through her fingers. "I have to go," she said suddenly. "Interview. Important one." He leaned his arm casually against the frame. "If the people inside see even half of what I just did, you'll be running this place in a month." Clara gave him one last look, a blend of gratitude and embarrassment. "Good luck with your incredibly polished life," she said, already turning away. "Same to you, Miss Mirror Moment." She didn't reply. She was already inside the building, a blur of nerves, determination, and slightly smeared lipstick. And upstairs, just before the elevator doors closed, Clara placed a hand over her chest and exhaled, steadying herself for what came next. Clara did her best to steady her breath as she stepped out of the elevator. The receptionist greeted her with a kind smile, as if this were just another ordinary day. "You may go in now, Miss Wynne. Mr. Hale will join you shortly." "Right, of course," Clara replied, her voice a few steps behind her composure. She smiled faintly. "Never been more emotionally balanced in my life." The conference room was striking, walls of glass, sleek furniture, and an air of importance that made her straighten her back instinctively. She sat delicately on the edge of a chair, her heart still racing like a parade drum echoing through city streets. Then the door opened. She turned, smile ready, posture rehearsed, and froze in place. Nicholas Hale entered the room like confidence personified. The same tailored suit, the same calm expression, the same unmistakable glint of mischief in his eyes. "It's him." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "You?" she blurted out, rising so quickly she nearly tipped the chair behind her. He raised an eyebrow, feigning mild surprise. "Me? Were you expecting someone else? You're the CEO? And you're the woman with the lipstick, the lettuce, and the bold use of car windows," he he replied, taking his seat with unshakable ease. Clara let out a strangled groan and covered her face. I want to vanish. Relax, Nicholas said, his voice low and amused. I try not to judge. Too much. He gestured to the seat opposite. Go ahead, make yourself comfortable, but if you need to adjust anything else, kindly give me a warning. Just so I'm prepared. Clara sank into the chair, willing the earth to open beneath her. This can't be real. It has to be a dream. Welcome to your interview, Miss Wynne, he said smoothly. And don't worry, whatever happens from here, it's unlikely to top what happened outside. She stared at the window behind him. Is it too late to jump? He chuckled. I'd shut the window first if I were you. You seem like a flight risk. At that moment, Clara was convinced the universe had a strange, slightly cruel sense of humor. Of all people, she had to humiliate herself in front of the most striking man she'd ever seen, who also happened to be the one deciding her future. Nicholas picked up her resume, scanning it with narrowed eyes. Clara Wynne, Bachelor's in Business Administration, Marketing Certification, 2 roles as a financial assistant. He murmured, then glanced up, eyes twinkling. No mention of sidewalk acrobatics or spontaneous performances through car windows. She gave a small, sheepish smile. I'm still revising that part. I thought about adding street performer as a side gig, but it didn't feel very professional. A shame, he replied, crossing his arms. I might have hired you on that alone. He leaned slightly forward, expression shifting. Have you worked with technology before? Clara nodded. Absolutely. Just yesterday, I got the microwave to work on the first try. Groundbreaking, really. Nicholas laughed softly, shaking his head. I like this energy. We're off to a strong start. He flipped a page, then looked back up. Tell me, why do you want to work here? Clara hesitated, then inhaled deeply. She could switch to her interview voice, recite prepared answers, but what was the point? After what had already happened, the only thing she had left was honesty. Because I'm good, she said, steady now. Even when no one expects much from me. Even without the right school names or connections over expensive dinners. I work hard, I don't give up, and if someone gives me a real chance, I don't waste it. Something in Nicholas's gaze changed. The teasing faded for a moment, replaced by something quieter, something that saw more than he'd expected. That was honest, he said quietly, and rare. I can lie too if you'd prefer, Clara added, sitting up straighter. I'm great at it. Like right now, I'm completely calm, totally not considering leaping through that window. He laughed again, a little softer this time. I like people who don't hide behind rehearsed answers, he said. But I also like to test limits. Clara tilted her head. Test them how? Nicholas twirled the pen in his fingers, watching her with a gleam that hinted at challenge. Well, for starters, what if I told you someone in this room already has an opinion? Nicholas rested his pen on the desk and met her eyes with a calm intensity. What if I told you, he said, that someone in this room already has an opinion about you? Clara tilted her head slightly, a subtle lift of one brow. Does that opinion include clumsy, overly talkative, and slightly traumatized by leafy greens? A small laugh escaped him. No, I'd say unpredictable, and, for reasons I can't quite explain yet, compelling. Clara felt her breath hitch, just slightly. The room suddenly felt smaller, or maybe warmer. She pushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, then found her voice. Well, she said softly, I'd say that person has questionable taste, but excellent judgment. Nicholas smiled then, not the amused curve of earlier, but a full, quiet smile that settled in the corners of his eyes. He closed her resume and placed it down carefully. Miss Wynne, he said, rising from his seat, I have a feeling we'll be crossing paths again very soon. Clara blinked. Wait, what do you mean? Is the interview over? I've seen everything I needed to, he replied simply. You've already passed the hardest part. She stood too, trying to steady her posture. And what part was that? Being yourself, he said, walking toward the door, especially when everything around you is falling apart. Clara stood frozen, unsure whether to laugh, cry, or grab her bag and run before he changed his mind. Well, thank you, Mr. Hale. He paused at the door. Just Nicholas? For now? She nodded, still trying to piece together what had just happened. As the door closed behind her, Clara leaned against the hallway wall and let out a long, disbelieving breath. There was no judgment in his eyes when she left, only something quiet and curious. It was, without question, the most unexpected interview of her life. But maybe also the most significant. The alarm rang at 6 a.m., but Clara had already been awake for 10 minutes, staring up at the ceiling of the cramped room she rented from an elderly woman with a cat she spoke to as if it were her roommate. Day 1, Clara thought, and her heart gave a nervous flutter. She stepped into a cold shower, pinned back her damp hair with a crooked clip, and put on the only white shirt she owned that wasn't stained. Her black pants had deep folds from being crammed in a drawer too long, but she did her best to smooth them with her hands. She looked into the cracked mirror in the hallway. "You look functional," she whispered to herself with a small smile. "And you now work at a high-tech company. Look at you, Clara Wynne. Almost executive material." The subway ride was a mild battle. She got elbowed twice and wore half a stranger's coffee by the time she reached her stop. She glanced at the brown stain blooming on her blouse and sighed. "It's fine," she muttered. "It fits the aesthetic of chaos." At the entrance of Lunaris Innovations, the receptionist greeted her warmly and walked her to the development department, where she would begin as an administrative assistant. The office was open and airy, all clean lines and glass walls. People moved with purpose, dressed as though any moment they might be called onto a TED stage. Clara adjusted her badge and stepped inside. "Hi everyone," she said, trying not to sound like she was holding her breath. "I'm Clara." 3 heads turned, 2 smiles, 1 polite nod. Then a woman with kind eyes and a mug of tea stepped forward. "Clara Wynne, right? I'm Emily. Welcome to the jungle." Clara chuckled nervously. "Thanks, I just hope I survive the week." Emily grinned. "With that resume and the infamous car window incident, you're already a legend." Clara blinked. "Already? How do you even know about that?" Emily tilted her head toward the glass wall. "Someone on the 3rd floor saw the whole thing reflected in the building. Said you were putting on lipstick, fixing your blouse, and the rest kind of speaks for itself." Clara groaned. "Fantastic. Day 1, and I'm already company folklore." "But charming folklore," Emily teased. "Come on, let me show you your desk." Her workstation was tucked between a cheerful fake plant and a printer that hummed like it had its own personality. It wasn't the executive floor, but it was hers, a beginning. And for now, that was enough. Not long after, as Clara settled into her seat and opened her inbox for the first time, she noticed movement through the glass. Nicholas Hale was walking past, elegant as always, deep in conversation with someone. He glanced her way for the briefest second, and for just a moment she swore he smiled. Nicholas Hale moved through the hallway with quiet authority. Black blazer crisp, phone pressed to his ear, each step deliberate. He paused only slightly when he caught sight of Clara near the break area. "Careful," he said smoothly, voice low but audible as he passed. "Coffee and lettuce." Clara's eyes widened just as she took a sip of water and nearly choked. Emily, standing beside her, stifled a laugh so sudden that she almost spilled her tea. "Miss Lettuce," she whispered under her breath, grinning as Nicholas disappeared around the corner. "Oh no." Clara groaned. "Please, no." But the damage was done. By midday, a neon-colored sticky note appeared on her desk with the words Miss Lettuce scrawled in bold letters, accompanied by a surprisingly artistic doodle of a bra. Clara dropped her head onto the desk with a muffled sigh. "I knew I should have stayed under the covers this morning." Emily laughed. "Relax, everyone here gets a nickname eventually. You were just remarkably efficient." The rest of the afternoon was a blur of onboarding videos, technical tutorials, and a relentless stream of spreadsheets. Clara tried her best to stay focused, though her brain was clearly waving a white flag by the 3rd module. Toward the end of the day, as she was finishing up a progress report, a notification popped up on her screen. Mandatory attendance, investor presentation, auditorium B, accompanied by C. Wynne. She read it twice, then a 3rd time. "Emily? Did you schedule this?" Emily clicked around, frowning. "Nope. Looks like Nicholas Hale added it himself." Clara's stomach sank. "Me? In an investor meeting? On my first day?" "Guess he sees potential in you," Emily shrugged. "Or he's hoping for another viral lettuce moment." Clara exhaled slowly and stood. "Here's hoping I don't trip into the spotlight and wake up on someone's LinkedIn feed." She walked toward the auditorium with steady steps, willing herself not to panic. Just breathe. Don't think about the investors. Don't think about stage fright. Just Breathe. Nicholas was already at the entrance when she arrived. Clara, on time. That's rare around here. She gave him a nervous smile. So you really want me in there with you? I like surprises, he said simply, and you're good at them. I usually sit in the back, she said, preferably near snacks. Well, today you're trading cookies for a front row seat, he said, opening the door. Just observe. No pressure. You don't have to speak unless you want to. She took a deep breath. Okay, but if I faint, I'm filing for hazard pay. They entered the auditorium together. The room buzzed with quiet energy, rows of tailored suits, polished shoes, and people who looked like they belonged in glossy magazines. Nicholas took the stage with ease, presenting the latest developments with precision and confidence. Everything was going smoothly until a sharp question from the back of the room cut through the air. How do you plan to reach younger users with this product? There was a beat of silence. Then Nicholas turned slightly and looked at Clara. Her heart jumped. She blinked. Me? All ears, he said, giving her space. Clara cleared her throat. Her voice came out softer than she intended, but steady. Maybe by showing the human side of tech, she said. Using humor, real-life situations, not making it feel exclusive or intimidating. Something that tells people, even if you still feel like a hacker when you use a microwave, you belong here. A few quiet chuckles moved through the room. One investor gave a thoughtful nod. Someone else added, "That's actually a good point." Nicholas looked at her, a glimmer of something proud behind his composed expression. As if to say, I knew you had it. After the presentation, as they walked toward the exit, he glanced at her and said, "Well, you survived your first day." "Barely," Clara replied, exhaling, "but still standing." "And you earned a nickname." Clara groaned, "One that will haunt me forever." "Or," he said with a hint of mischief, "it could be your legacy." Clara laughed, this time without hesitation. For the first time since she arrived, something settled in her chest, a quiet sense of belonging. The next morning, Clara woke to the faint hum of the city outside and the soft snore of her landlady's cat from the other room. Her mind felt groggy, but her body was already bracing for whatever came next. Second day. She sat up, rubbed her face, and looked at her phone. Still employed. Miracle? Or clerical error? She pulled herself out of bed and dressed with care. Black slacks, a beige blouse with slightly uneven buttons, and the only heels she owned that hadn't completely surrendered to time. She pinned her hair back neatly and chose a softer lipstick this time. "No lettuce," she said to her reflection in the cracked mirror. "No surprises." But deep down, a small voice whispered, "Nothing about this job has been predictable so far." And maybe that was the best part. Disasters, Clara thought, stepping off the subway. "Let's see what you've got today." As she entered the glass-walled lobby of Lunaris Innovations, the receptionist gave her a knowing smile and a polite nod. Clara returned it with a half-wave that landed somewhere between awkward and charming, then made her way to the development floor. Emily was already at her desk, hunched over a spreadsheet, chewing on a protein bar with the enthusiasm of someone gnawing on cardboard. "Survived the initiation, Miss Lettuce?" Emily asked, eyes still glued to her screen. "Barely," Clara replied, "but technically I'm still breathing." "Good," Emily said, tapping a few keys, "because you've been summoned to another meeting." Clara stopped mid-stride. "Another presentation? You're kidding." "Not exactly. It's an alignment meeting. The kind where executives, partners, and investors all gather in one room to pretend they're calm, brilliant, and not silently panicking." Clara's eyes widened. "And I'm invited. Why?" "A rumor says Nicholas was impressed by your honesty last time. Said you brought something grounded into the room," Emily replied, finally looking up. "Now he wants to see if you can do it again, but this time with a little more polish." "Polish? I don't even have composure before 10 in the morning." "Then grab some coffee," Emily said, grinning, "and fake it." Clara managed a laugh, but her stomach was already in knots. She made her way to the kitchen, poured herself a cup of coffee, and returned to her desk. Her inbox pinged. Subject: Executive Meeting, 10 a.m., 25th floor. Dress code: confidence. Clara stared at the screen. "Can I rent confidence by the hour?" she muttered, sipping her coffee. 20 minutes before the meeting, she slipped into the restroom for final checks. Hair pinned. Lipstick even. Teeth? No vegetables. Thank heaven. She took one last breath, squared her shoulders, and stepped into the hallway. Her heels clicked with satisfying confidence across the polished floor, until one of them didn't. There was a sharp crack. She stopped, looked down. The heel of her right shoe had snapped off completely. Not chipped, not loose. It looked like a small animal had chewed it off in a fit of rage. No, not now. She leaned against the wall, one hand on her forehead, glancing around. Empty hallway. No witnesses. No help. She hobbled back toward the restroom like a wounded bird and rummaged through the bottom of her bag. Emergency stash. A hair tie, a coin, and a half-roll of duct tape. "If this works," she whispered, "I swear I'll never buy thrift store heels again." Clara knelt, secured the broken heel with duct tape, looped the hair tie around it for extra hold, and tried to convince herself that it looked intentional. It didn't. It looked like a child had crafted a school project on her foot. But it held. 3 minutes late, she slipped into the elevator and pressed the button for the 25th floor. As the doors began to close, a hand slid between them, pausing the motion with movie-perfect timing. Nicholas stepped in, as composed as ever. Charcoal gray suit, crisp white shirt, the faint scent of expensive coffee clinging to him like a signature. "Miss Wynne," he said, eyes cool but amused. Always on time, with just the right amount of drama to keep things interesting. Clara offered a smile, lifting her chin. "Style is part of the brand, Mr. Hale." He glanced down, catching sight of the duct tape. "Is that?" "It's called innovation," she replied. "Adaptability, creativity, very in-demand corporate skills." Nicholas chuckled, shaking his head. "You're definitely not from HR, and probably not from this planet either." They stood in silence for a moment, at the elevator humming softly between floors. Somehow, the quiet wasn't tense. It was almost easy. As they reached their destination, Nicholas turned to her. "Try not to slip on stage. Investors tend to prefer their pitches without acrobatics," Clara smirked. "Unless I do it in slow motion. Very cinematic." He gave her a look, half warning, half admiration, and together they stepped out onto the polished floor, where another round of unexpected moments surely awaited. The meeting room on the 25th floor felt like something out of a high-level strategy film. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened up to a sweeping view of the city skyline, all glass and ambition. At the center sat a long oval table, dotted with bottles of sparkling water, sugar-free biscuits, and a quiet tension only boardrooms knew how to breed. Clara sat beside Nicholas, trying to appear composed, even as her sock clung stubbornly to the duct tape patch holding her shoe together. The meeting began with slides and charts, market trends, growth forecasts, strategic metrics. Clara scribbled notes diligently, though half the terminology felt like it had been borrowed from an alien language. Then came the section on user experience, a new direction for one of the company's major projects. Nicholas turned toward her, his tone calm but unmistakably direct. "Clara, would you like to share what we discussed about user perception?" Her eyes widened slightly. What we discussed. There had been no such discussion. This was clearly an invitation to improvise, or maybe a test. Either way, she couldn't hesitate. Clara stood up carefully, praying the heel wouldn't betray her again, and offered a steady smile. "What we've come to understand," she began, "is that people don't just want technology that works. They want to feel like it sees them, that it understands them. They want simplicity, yes, but they also want warmth." She glanced at the faces around the table. An interface that doesn't intimidate. A message that says, "Hey, it's okay. You don't have to know what cloud computing is to belong here." There were a few soft laughs. One investor, silver-haired in a beige suit, leaned forward and said, "Finally, someone speaking human." Clara sat back down, pulse racing, trying not to fidget with her patched shoe. Nicholas gave the faintest nod. "Well said." As the room slowly emptied after the meeting, Nicholas approached her, hands in his pockets. "You realize you stole the show, right?" "I hope it wasn't just because of my footwear," Clara replied, half joking. "That too," he said, "but mostly because you translated complexity into something real." "That's a rare gift," Clara smiled. "Same gift that leads me to questionable coffee and even worse shoes, apparently." Nicholas looked at her then, a little longer than necessary, his voice softened. "Do you have plans tonight?" Clara blinked. Once, twice, 3 times. Is that an invitation?" "A professional one," he said with a smirk. "Dinner with some of our partners. I think it would be good for you to come. Get a feel for the broader team. But he paused, glancing down. Maybe consider changing your shoes first. She laughed. Deal. Just let me know if it's sushi or spreadsheets. I'll email you the details, he said, starting to walk away. Then he stopped and turned. Clara, thanks for today. As she stepped into the elevator, the patched-up shoe held firm, but her heart was fluttering like the duct tape trying to keep everything together. That evening, Clara stood in front of her closet like a contestant in a game where none of the choices felt like the right one. Black. Always black. It's slimming, it's safe, and it hides the fact that I forgot to shave my legs, she thought. She pulled out the one black dress that still fit without requiring divine intervention. It was simple, but elegant enough, and familiar in the way only long-loved clothing could be. She slipped into a pair of well-worn ballet flats, the same pair that had danced through more weddings than she could count, and applied her lipstick with the quiet intensity of someone trying to draw a perfect line on an uncertain evening. Her phone buzzed. Dinner, 8 p.m., Le Dujardin. Formal attire. P.S. No duct tape, please. Clara smiled. No duct tape noted, but if my shoe falls apart again, I'm relying on sheer willpower. At the subway station, she rode the escalator with the grace of someone who'd nearly tripped, twice. She walked the 3 blocks to the restaurant, dodging a puddle, an elderly woman pushing a cart, and a skateboarder who very nearly sent her flying. When she arrived in front of the restaurant, she paused to take it all in. Le Dujardin looked like a scene lifted straight from a French film. Dim lights glowing through the windows, a soft buzz of conversation, and patrons dressed in coats that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The waiter at the door turned as she approached, with a look that made her check, just for a second, if she still had duct tape anywhere visible. The maître stood at the entrance like he just stepped out of a fashion magazine, or perhaps a documentary on elegance. Good evening, he greeted, accent polished to cinematic perfection. How may I assist you? Clara adjusted the strap of her modest backpack, suddenly hyper-aware of how it clashed with the room's ambiance. She cleared her throat, trying to sound like she belonged. I'm here with Nicholas Hale's party. The maître's eyebrow lifted ever so slightly. You are a guest of Mr. Hale? No, I mean, yes, but not like that. I'm an employee. A legitimate salaried one, she added quickly. We're colleagues. He invites me to meetings, not the romantic kind, the PowerPoint kind. He didn't react, simply nodded and led her through the dimly lit restaurant to a quiet table tucked in the back. Clara smoothed her dress as she walked, praying she wouldn't trip on the plush carpet. Then she saw him. Nicholas sat alone, a glass of red wine in hand, looking like he belonged in a perfectly staged magazine spread. Tailored blazer, crisp shirt, a man who probably selected wine based solely on poetic French names. Clara stopped. Where's everyone else? They canceled, Nicholas said, not missing a beat. All of them. At the same time. Strange, isn't it? Uh-huh. Like those rom-com scenes where someone accidentally falls into their crush's arms. Total coincidence. He smiled. Sit, Clara, it's just a work dinner, one with linen napkins and staff who judge you in silence. She took her seat, adjusting a chair that clearly hadn't been designed for actual humans. Right, just a work dinner, she murmured. In a place where menus don't have prices, that's always promising. If anything's overpriced, Nicholas said lightly, we'll just pretend it tastes terrible. The waiter reappeared with practiced grace. Would you like something to drink? Sparkling water, Clara replied, then added, and perhaps a small side of confidence. Nicholas chuckled. Red wine for me, and she'll have still water. Apparently, bubbles are distressing. They give me hiccups, Clara said, shrugging, and humiliation. The waiter nodded, unreadable, and glided away. Clara opened the menu and blinked. Everything was in French. Everything in fine print. Everything seemed suspicious. What's this one? She asked, pointing. Something with duck liver? Foie gras, Nicholas replied. And this one? Same duck, different name? Maigret de canard. Same duck, different fate. So the duck dies twice and ends up on 2 separate plates. Someone should tell him he's overachieving. They laughed, easing into a more comfortable rhythm. When the waiter returned, Clara quickly pointed at the only item she could pronounce without butchering. I'll have the croque monsieur? Ah, a classic, the waiter said. Bread, cheese, comfort disguised as cuisine. Perfect, that I can handle. When the food arrived, they ate with a kind of quiet amusement. Nicholas held his fork like a sculptor with a chisel. Clara, by contrast, was still deciding whether she was supposed to be elegant or just get the food into her mouth without dropping it. She leaned forward slightly. "So, why me?" Nicholas looked up. "Why you what?" "These dinners, the meetings, the elevator sarcasm, I'm starting to feel like a very polite experiment." He smiled. "You're different." "Is that corporate code for weird?" "No, it's a polite way of saying you do things like this." He motioned toward her. Clara glanced down and realized her napkin had slipped from her lap. Again, she'd tried to catch it with her foot, which was now awkwardly resting on it. "I'm just efficient," she said, flustered. "Why bend down when you can use your leg like an extra arm?" "And yet," Nicholas said, leaning back, "you managed to impress a room full of investors yesterday. I was sure they were going to vote me out of the building." "They nearly applauded you because you didn't talk at them. You spoke to them, like a real person." "That's rare." Clara grinned. "So my skill set is mostly stammering and covering it up with light sarcasm." "Exactly." She laughed, wiping the corners of her mouth. "And you? Have you always been this polished? Calm CEO, timeless blazer, hair like you just walked off a shampoo commercial?" "Absolutely," he said with a straight face. "Born in a three-piece suit, clutching a business plan." "Liar," she said, shaking her head. "You look like someone who once—" "I was that kid in school," Nicholas said, leaning back in his chair, "who corrected the teacher." Clara grinned. "And I was the one who copied from the kid next to me and still got it wrong." They both laughed, surprised by how easily the conversation flowed. "Funny how we ended up here," Clara added, looking around the elegant restaurant. "Dinner, conversation, fine cutlery." "The power of networking," Nicholas said, raising his glass. "Or pure chaos," Clara replied. The waiter returned with dessert, an artful creation of chocolate and gold dust that looked more like sculpture than food. Clara went silent, her eyes wide. "Is this edible? Or just for taking photos?" "Just don't press too hard," Nicholas said, smirking. "If it falls apart, they might charge you for modern art." Clara picked up her spoon with the focus of a surgeon. "If it collapses, I'm calling it an emotional earthquake." Nicholas chuckled again, and when Clara glanced up, her smile was shy but real. The atmosphere between them had shifted. Still light, still playful, but warmer now. Familiar. Like sitting across from someone who knew you longer than just a few weeks. Someone who happened to be absurdly well-dressed, charming, and, yes, dangerously handsome. When they stepped outside, the night air met them with a quiet chill. Clara instinctively rubbed her arms. Nicholas began to remove his jacket, but she waved him off. "Thanks, but I'd probably break into a nervous sweat just trying not to ruin it." "It's just a jacket. Doesn't bite." "It probably costs more than my rent," Clara said, "and expensive things make me nervous." "Why's that?" "Because expensive things are fragile," she replied, "like stiletto heels, or hearts that accidentally develop feelings for their boss." Nicholas looked at her a moment too long, then smiled, not saying anything more. "Want me to call you a car?" he offered. "I'm taking the subway," she replied. Back to reality. "I'll walk you to the station then. Only if you don't complain about the smell. Only if you promise not to touch the handrails. Those have more DNA than a crime lab." They laughed as they walked, their pace easy, steps echoing on quiet sidewalks under the glow of street lamps. The world felt slower, more cinematic. They passed a shop window with mannequins dressed in fashion that made no seasonal sense, fur coats paired with shorts. "What is that supposed to be?" Clara said. "Post-apocalyptic couture," Nicholas replied. The mannequin clearly had a fight with the seasons. When they reached the subway entrance, Clara paused at the top of the stairs. "That was nice," she said. "Strangely nice." "The strangest dinner I've had all year," Nicholas admitted. "Don't you go out much?" "Only when I'm with someone unpredictable, who makes me laugh and turns disasters into charm." "So," she said, "you like danger?" "Only the kind that ends with a smile." Clara took a few steps down, then turned back. "Nicholas?" "Yes? If I trip in the lobby tomorrow, will you fire me?" "Only if you do it with flair." She smiled, then disappeared into the station, her steps lighter than they'd been in weeks. The next morning, Clara woke before her alarm, and that was never a good sign. She stayed still for a moment, her face buried in the pillow, before reaching for her phone. The message from the real estate agency stared back at her. Subject, final notice before legal action. She read it 3 times, still hated it. Her bank account balance hadn't changed. In fact, her app froze every time she opened it, as if even it couldn't bear to look. "All right, universe," she whispered. "Message received. No need to shout." She got out of bed, pulled on the cleanest pair of jeans she had, and a simple black blouse. Hair tied back, lipstick applied with the last trace of optimism. She poured what remained of her coffee into a travel mug, more caffeine than hope, and headed out the door. On the subway to Manhattan, her thoughts were far away, tangled in numbers and anxieties. She nearly forgot to swipe her card at the turnstile and walked to her office on autopilot. When she entered the floor, Emily waved from her desk, bagel in hand. "Morning, Miss Lettuce. Sleep well?" "Sleep?" Clara asked, blinking. "Is that still a thing?" Emily smirked and pointed to Clara's screen. "You've got a meeting with Nicholas. 10 o'clock. Clara gave a small nod as she glanced at the calendar on her screen. Well, she thought, if he fires me today, at least I'll save on subway fare. When she entered Nicholas's office, he was flipping through a stack of papers, a mug of black coffee in his hand, unsweetened, which in Clara's opinion bordered on criminal behavior. "Good morning, Clara," he said without looking up. "Have a seat. There's something I'd like to show you." She sat down, trying to mask the growing tightness in her chest. "I'm listening." Nicholas slid a folder across the desk. "I want you to take the lead on a project we've put on hold for a while. It has real potential if the right person handles it." Clara opened the folder and scanned the first page. Graphs, budgets, technical terms she had to read twice to make sense of. Her brow furrowed. "This is layered." "It is," Nicholas agreed, "but I think you're the right fit. You're creative, intuitive, and you speak in a way that people actually listen to. You make things feel human again." She looked up, surprised. "Me? You really mean me?" Nicholas nodded. "You. But what's the catch? You'll need extra hours, late evenings, maybe even weekends. It won't be easy." "Does it come with extra pay?" "It does," he said simply. "You'll be compensated." Clara felt her shoulders drop slightly, a wave of quiet relief brushing over her. "I'll do it." She tried not to let too much emotion through her voice, but Nicholas caught the flicker behind her eyes. "Is everything all right?" he asked gently. Clara hesitated, then said, "More or less, just personal stuff." He didn't press. "If there's anything I can do, anything at all, let me know." She gave a quick nod and returned to her desk, where she threw herself into work. The hours passed in silence, her hands scribbling notes, sketching mock-ups, and typing until her fingers ached. But her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Final reminder, rent due tomorrow, or legal action will proceed. She locked the screen and stared at the wall, her throat dry. She stood, walked to the kitchen, poured herself water, but still couldn't shake the weight in her chest. By early evening, the office was nearly empty. Emily appeared at her desk with 2 small chocolates. "You're still here?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "New project," Clara replied, exhausted. "You planning to move in? Honestly? Not ruling it out." Emily placed 1 chocolate beside her. "At least eat. It's the cure for 70% of office meltdowns." Clara smiled. "Thanks. You're officially HR and therapist in one." After Emily left, Clara gathered her notes and walked toward Nicholas's office. She knocked gently and stepped inside. "I have a rough draft," she said. "Still early, but I wanted to show you where I'm heading." Nicholas took the pages and read through them carefully. He made a few quick notes in the margin and looked up. "This is good," he said. "You understand people, and that's rarer than you'd think in a place like this." Clara gave a polite smile, but her mind was already drifting elsewhere. Nicholas noticed. "Clara," he said, softer now. "Is something going on?" She stared at the floor for a second, then exhaled and told him the truth. "I'm being evicted. I have until tomorrow to pay. And I can't cover it, not on my salary." She laughed awkwardly, as if saying it aloud would somehow make it smaller. Nicholas didn't react with shock. Instead, he opened a drawer and pulled out a thin blue folder. "We have a support fund for employees. Discreet, temporary. It's not a handout. It's something we offer to people who show up, who work hard, like you." Clara took the folder as if it weighed 100 pounds. "I don't know if I can accept this." "Why not?" "Because it feels like losing," she admitted. "Like I failed." Nicholas looked at her with an expression that held no judgment, only understanding. "Accepting help isn't failing," he said. It's just choosing to carry less weight. No one gets through alone. Clara was quiet. She closed the folder gently. Can I think about it? Of course. Just think with kindness toward yourself. That night, Clara sat on the edge of her small bed, heels off, exhaustion heavy in her bones. She opened the folder again. The numbers weren't extravagant, but they were enough to cover rent, to keep her going. Just for a while. Just to breathe. All right, she thought, just a breather. I'll take it. The next morning she arrived earlier than usual. The office was still quiet, washed in pale sunlight. She walked straight to Nicholas's door, the folder pressed to her chest. Morning, she said. Nicholas looked up. Morning. I've thought about it, she said, and I accept. He nodded once, kindly. Good. Everything will be fine. Thank you. Now go, he said, a hint of a smile in his voice. We've got a tight deadline. She stepped out, the door clicking softly behind her. Her steps felt lighter. Her body still tired, but her heart not quite so heavy. For the first time that week, Clara felt something unexpected. She didn't feel alone anymore. Monday arrived with the quiet hum of possibility. Clara walked into the office, ideas buzzing in her mind, and a feeling in her chest that maybe, just maybe, she was about to change something. Even if it was just the background color of the dashboard. Clara sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and took a steadying breath. The presentation was taking shape, but she wasn't going to build it the usual way. She wanted clarity, simplicity, humanity. She structured it the way she would want to understand it. Clean slides, plain language, and real-life comparisons. Using this system, she muttered aloud while typing, should be as easy as making instant noodles. 3 steps and done. Emily walked by, just in time to catch her talking to the screen. Already having full conversations with yourself? Only when the ideas are worth it. Then maybe you should start charging for TED Talks. Clara smiled and kept working. This wasn't going to be another jargon-heavy pitch. She wanted to explain the system the way you'd explain it to your neighbor over coffee. Simple graphs, friendly tone, real metaphors. The more she worked, the clearer it all became. Not just for others, but for herself too. Later that afternoon, Nicholas appeared beside her desk. His voice was low, but warm. You look focused. I am, though this is just a draft. Let's take a look. She turned the screen toward him. He read through the slides slowly, then looked up. This is excellent. Clara blinked. Really? I was worried it'd feel too casual. That's exactly why it works. It's accessible, clear, and most importantly, it builds trust. He paused. I want you to come present this with me at the tech fair in Chicago. Clara's mouth opened slightly. Chicago? A fair? As in travel? Yes, we have a booth. I think your perspective will stand out. You explain things differently, and people listen. She was quiet for a moment. I've never traveled for work before. Well, Nicholas said, then let's make your first time count. The week passed in a blur. Clara was nervous, but also excited. Emily lent her a small suitcase and a list of survival tips. Just one rule, she said, mock serious. Don't say like you know into the mic. I'll try, Clara promised. By Friday, she and Nicholas were at the airport. The flight was smooth. They talked lightly, songs that get stuck in your head, the politics of airline snacks. Every time I order chicken, Clara said, I immediately regret it. Every time I order pasta, Nicholas replied, I get an apology. They arrived in Chicago and headed straight to the hotel. The next morning, the venue buzzed with activity. Booths, badges, lights. Clara rehearsed with the team, ran through her slides. Her voice trembled at first, but soon she found her rhythm. She spoke clearly. She smiled. She used real-world metaphors. She watched faces light up in understanding. Nicholas stood at the side, arms crossed, saying nothing, but listening to everything. Later, one of the technical leads leaned over and whispered, She's good. People actually get what she's saying. Clara heard him. She pretended not to. But inside, her heart was quietly doing cartwheels. That evening, Nicholas suggested they grab a quick bite. Nothing formal, he said. Just something easy after a long day. As long as it's not another French place, Clara replied. I'm still emotionally scarred. Deal. They found a casual spot near the hotel, ate warm food, talked about the event, laughed over the possibilities of what might go wrong. If I forget everything tomorrow, Clara said, can I improvise? You can, Nicholas said. Just maybe skip the instant noodle analogy on stage. But that's my best one. We'll save it for the sequel. They walked back slowly, city lights glinting off the sidewalks. It was colder than expected. Clara crossed her arms. I should have brought a thicker coat. Want mine? No, then you'll freeze, and I'd feel guilty. At the hotel entrance, Nicholas held the door open. Planning to get some sleep? If I don't, she said, I'll probably mix up all the slides. You'll do great. If I trip on stage, I'll applaud like it was part of the act. Clara smiled, stepped into the elevator, and as the doors closed, she exhaled softly. Tomorrow was the big day, and for the first time, she didn't want to run away from it. The next morning, Clara woke up with her heart racing. She reached for her phone, 7 a.m. In her dream, she'd been standing on stage, accidentally speaking French, and the microphone hadn't worked. She'd woken up halfway through shouting the word, croissant. Clara stretched slowly, then rose from bed, her body still half asleep, but her mind already buzzing. After a warm shower, she paused in front of the bathroom mirror, silently asking it for advice. It gave her nothing, so she spoke to herself instead. You'll be fine. You've practiced. And no one here knows you tend to trip over your own feet. She pulled her shoulders back and headed down to breakfast. Nicholas was already there, coffee in hand, a small notebook open beside him. He looked as composed as ever. Clara grabbed a slice of toast and joined him at the table. Did you sleep well? He asked. I dreamed I was a futuristic sleeping beauty with slides, she replied. Well, at least you got some rest. More or less, she said. But I'm ready, I think. Nicholas smiled. You'll do great. Promise you won't leave me alone on stage? I promise, unless the stage collapses. Perfect, I feel so reassured. At the venue, the air buzzed with the kind of focused energy only large-scale tech events carry. Their presentation was scheduled in one of the reserved rooms, a quieter space meant for deeper discussions. Clara reviewed her slides one last time, breathing in slowly through her nose, out through her mouth. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her eyes were steady. When it was time, Nicholas opened with a short, confident introduction, then turned the floor over to her. At first, her voice wavered ever so slightly. But then came a rhythm. Her examples were simple, her tone warm. She spoke like she was having a conversation, not delivering a lecture. People leaned in, some laughed at her metaphors. Others nodded, visibly connecting with what she said. A few even scribbled notes with real enthusiasm. By the time the questions came, she answered with a calm she hadn't known she had. One attendee praised her clarity. Another said they'd finally understood a concept that had always confused them. After they stepped out of the room, Nicholas turned to her with a proud smile. You were incredible. I didn't faint, Clara said, grinning. So that's already a personal record. And you got a developer to laugh. That's practically a miracle. I thought he was just in pain. Nope, that was an actual laugh. They spent the rest of the day moving through booths, speaking with other teams, exchanging cards, and gathering insights. It was tiring, but Clara felt lighter with every interaction. Later that afternoon, they returned to the hotel for a short break before dinner with other company team members. Clara dropped her bag on the chair in her room and collapsed onto the bed. She grabbed her phone and texted Emily. The presentation was a success. I'm still alive. Didn't trip. Nicholas smiled 3 times. Is this real life? Emily replied almost instantly. It's a miracle. Also a sign. Enjoy it. After resting a while, Clara made her way to the lobby. Nicholas was already waiting near the elevator. Ready for dinner? He asked. Hungry? Yes. Socially energized? We'll find out. They stepped into the elevator together. Just the two of them. A quietness settled over them. Not awkward, but charged with something unspoken. Clara watched the floor numbers climb. Nicholas said nothing for a moment, then turned to her. I'm proud of you today. She looked at him. Thank you. You helped me believe I could do it. It wasn't help, he said softly. I just noticed what was already there. She looked away for a second, then met his gaze again. They both smiled, but this time it felt different, warmer, closer. Then, without warning, the elevator jolted and stopped. Clara blinked. Was that? Nicholas glanced at the panel. Looks like we're stuck. Clara let out a breath. Is this some cosmic joke? Maybe the universe just likes keeping you on your toes. She laughed, a little nervously. All that's missing now is the lights going out. And just like that, the lights flickered off. 2 seconds, then back on. You've got to be kidding me, she whispered. Nicholas pressed the emergency button. A calm voice responded, assuring them that the situation was being handled. "Well," he said, leaning back against the wall, "looks like we've got a little time." Clara closed her eyes for a second. "Okay, no panic. I just have to pretend this is normal, a dramatic pause in a well-paced story." "This feels like a scene from a movie," Clara said softly, her eyes still on the elevator panel. "You're the mysterious character, and I'm the main one who talks too much when she's nervous." Nicholas smiled. "Not exactly inaccurate." Clara turned to him. He was already looking at her. For a second, time bent in on itself. "This really does feel like a movie," she whispered. "All that's missing is the kiss." Nicholas tilted his head slightly. "Should we make it real?" Clara went still. Red flooded her cheeks like a sunrise and fast forward. She didn't speak. Neither did he. But they looked at each other, not with curiosity, but with something quieter. Closer. He took a small step forward. Her heart thudded in her chest, and just like that, the elevator jolted and started moving again. Clara looked up at the ceiling. "Of course. Now," Nicholas chuckled. "Seems the universe didn't want the cliché." The doors slid open. They stepped out together, side by side. Neither said anything at first, but they were both smiling in that way people do when something unspoken lingers in the air. Clara broke the silence. "So, should we pretend nothing happened?" "I'm not sure I want to pretend," Nicholas said gently, "but maybe we save that conversation for after dinner." Deal. The walk to the restaurant felt different than the night before. The city lights seemed softer, the air lighter, as if something between them had quietly shifted. Clara knew deep down what happened in that elevator hadn't ended. It had only paused. The flight back to New York was quiet, but not heavy. It was the kind of silence where two people are lost in the same memory, unsure whether to say it out loud. Clara stared out the window. The clouds drifted by slowly, but inside her head, everything was moving too fast. The trip, the presentation, the almost kiss. The way Nicholas had looked at her. It was all tangled inside her, like a film still playing long after the credits had rolled. Beside her, Nicholas wore headphones, eyes on a documentary. But every so often, he glanced her way. She noticed, and he knew she noticed. After landing, they shared a car back to the city. Clara tried to keep things light. "I think I need a full week just to process everything that happened." "You can take 2 days off if you want," Nicholas offered. "And miss the chance to find out if I'm still Miss Lettuce?" Unthinkable. He smiled. "That nickname isn't going anywhere. Office legends tend to stick." When they reached the building, Clara hesitated for a second before stepping out. "So, should we pretend it was just a normal work trip?" "If that's easier for now," he said, "then yes. I'm not sure it is what I want, but maybe it's simpler. Then it's a deal." Monday came, and Clara walked into the office like she always had. But something had changed, or at least it felt like it had. She sensed it in the way people looked at her, in the quiet smiles, in the glances by the water cooler that stopped mid-sentence when she walked by. She didn't need to ask. Emily was the first to say it outright. "I know everything." Clara blinked. "Everything about?" "About you, Nicholas, the elevator, the almost kiss. You two walked out looking like a rom-com poster. You know how fast stories spread in this place." Clara groaned. "But nothing even happened." "Exactly. And that's why people are obsessed. The what almost happened is more exciting than the truth." Clara dropped her head onto her desk. "Great, I'm officially the main character in a workplace rumor." "Well," Emily said, biting into her bagel, "at least you're a likable main character." Clara tried to ignore it. She really did. But the whispers didn't stop. Nor did the looks. Half curious, half admiring. It wasn't malicious. It was unexpected and uncomfortable. It felt like she'd leveled up in the social dynamic of the office without doing anything, except maybe standing too close to the CEO in a moment that hadn't even happened. And that wasn't how she wanted to be seen. She wanted to be remembered for her work, her clarity, her ideas, not for an elevator, not for a maybe. Nicholas too seemed subtly different, still kind, still composed. But behind his usual calm, Clara sensed something else, something unspoken, something unfinished. Nicholas was still professional, still focused and composed, but there was something new in the way they spoke, a subtle softness in their conversations, a pause that lingered a little longer than before when they passed each other in the hallway. A glance held for half a second too long. And yet, neither of them mentioned the trip, or the almost kiss in the elevator, until one afternoon. After a long string of back-to-back meetings, Clara stepped into the elevator alone. Just as the doors began to close, Nicholas slipped in. They stood silently. The air was still. Clara pressed her floor. Nicholas kept his hands in his pockets. They didn't look at each other, like the space between them had become a quiet truce. "I heard we've become some kind of office legend," Clara said at last, her voice soft but steady. "I've heard that too," Nicholas replied. "And you're not going to say anything?" "I'd rather not add fuel to the fire," he said. "But if you want, I could draft a formal statement. Nothing happened in the elevator, signed, both parties involved." Clara smiled. "That would only make them more curious." "Probably." Silence again. The elevator stopped. The doors opened. They walked out together. "I need to talk to you later," Nicholas said quietly. "About the project?" "That too." Clara nodded, but her heart was already racing. The next morning, Nicholas called her into his office. She sat down, her palms pressed against her lap. He closed his laptop, then looked at her. "First," he said, "thank you. The project was a success. The board approved the format, and your proposal's going to be used in the new campaign." Clara blinked. "Really?" He nodded. "You made it work. You brought something new, and more importantly, you made people listen." She exhaled, a real deep breath. "I'm glad to hear that. I put everything into it." Nicholas paused. "There's something else," he added, "about the rumors, the trip, everything people have been saying. I don't want it to hurt you or your reputation here." Clara hesitated. "It already is, a little." "How do you feel about that?" She took her time before answering. "I never thought I'd care so much about what people say," she admitted, "but I do, and I don't want to just be the elevator girl." "You're not," Nicholas said firmly. "Clara, you're one of the most intelligent, thoughtful, and creative people I've worked with. That's not a compliment. It's a fact." She looked at him, unsure what to say. Then finally, "Thank you. I needed to hear that." Nicholas nodded. "And if you ever want to talk about anything, I'm here." Clara stood, her expression softer now. "Maybe someday, but right now I have a report to finish." "Of course." As she walked out of his office, her mind spun. She had what she'd worked for: recognition, respect, results. But what she felt when she looked at Nicholas, that wasn't something she could put in a report. Later that day, Emily appeared at her desk, wearing that look. The one that meant she knew something. So Emily asked, "Did he talk to you?" "He did," Clara replied. "About the project and the rumors. And nothing." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you wanted?" Clara let out a quiet sigh. "I don't know what I want." "Sometimes," Emily said, "you just need time." "Or a new elevator," Clara added. They both laughed. "For now," Clara said, "I think I'll just take the stairs." 2 hours later, Clara opened her email and nearly choked on her coffee. A digital invitation, gold lettering, elegant script, one word in bold, gala formal attire required. She read it 3 times, just to make sure it wasn't spam. Then stood and walked straight to Emily's desk. "Did you see this?" Emily didn't even look up. "The gala? Of course. And let me guess, you already have a dress, a salon appointment, and your nail color picked." "Obviously," Clara groaned. "I don't even know if I'm going. My bank account is allergic to formal wear." Emily looked at her with the fierce determination of someone who had made up her mind. "You are going, and you're wearing one of my dresses. But you're taller, and you know how to sew. You'll make it work." Clara smiled despite herself. 3 days, huh? Plenty of time. Trust me." In the bathroom of the office building, Clara stood in front of the mirror, wrestling with the zipper of the dress Emily had lent her. It wasn't a perfect fit, a little snug around the ribs, but at least she could move. Mostly. She glanced down at her shoes, a pair of simple black heels she'd kept for special occasions. The left one already tilted ever so slightly to the side, like it had seen better years. "This'll be fine," she told her reflection. "It's just a party, with music, fancy appetizers, and people whose paychecks could fund small countries. No big deal." The gala venue felt like something out of a dream. Warm lighting spilled across polished floors. Laughter floated gently above the notes of a string quartet tucked away in a corner. People stood in circles, balancing champagne flutes and conversations. Clara entered carefully, mindful of every step, willing her heels to behave. "Clara!" She turned at the sound of her name. Nicholas stood nearby, a slight smile playing on his lips. She said, adjusting the strap on her shoulder. I look normal, he said, then quickly corrected himself. I mean, elegant, normal for someone who's always elegant. She laughed softly. Thank you. I think the dress is Emily's. And the heel? Might not survive the night. Then we'll walk slowly, he said. They made their way across the room, joining a group of team members who greeted them with smiles, small talk, and inside jokes from the recent tech fair. For most of the evening, Clara stayed close to Nicholas, comfortably, not clingingly. She noticed how people looked at him. The quiet admiration, the soft awe. Especially the women, elegant, confident, some of whom looked like they stepped out of a fashion magazine. But Clara held her head high. She belonged here. Even if her borrowed dress had been stitched 2 nights ago and her shoes were silently rebelling. Emily appeared later, drink in hand and eyes sparkling. You're doing great. You haven't spilled anything. You haven't tripped. That's already a win. There's still half an hour left, Clara whispered. Plenty of time for disaster. Relax, Emily said. Everyone's been saying great things about you. Clara glanced sideways. Nicholas was speaking with 2 company partners, but as if he felt her gaze, he looked up. Their eyes met for just a second before she looked away, heart fluttering. Then she felt it. A subtle shift under her left foot. She shifted her weight, just slightly, and heard it. Snap. Oh no, she breathed. Emily turned toward her. What is it? My heel. It gave out. Can you still walk? Only if waddling counts. Come on. Emily grabbed her arm gently and guided her toward the side garden outside the hall. It was quieter there. The air cooler, softer. Clara sat on a nearby bench, trying to hide her crooked shoe behind the folds of her dress. I'll see if the event team has a spare pair of flats, Emily said. You're lucky I think of these things. You're a superhero, Clara whispered. Emily disappeared inside. Moments later, Nicholas appeared in the garden. Everything all right? Clara gave a small, embarrassed smile. More or less. My shoe gave up on life. Need help making a quiet escape? I would, but I'd like to walk out with a little dignity, and maybe in a straight line. He sat beside her on the bench, his tone softer than usual. I thought you were glowing in there. Then you vanished. Because my shoe decided to betray me, she said, and I didn't want to become the talk of the evening. I think you already are, he said gently, but not for the reason you think. She looked at him. You're sure? I am. They sat there for a moment, letting the sounds of the party drift into the background. Do you remember how we met? She asked. Of course, Nicholas replied with a smile. You were adjusting your bra in the reflection of my car window, and you had lettuce in your teeth. Clara laughed, then turned toward him. Why did you hire me again? Because you were exactly what this company needed. And maybe what I needed too. She fell quiet. Her heart beat faster than she wanted to admit. Nicholas leaned slightly toward her. Clara, but before he could finish, Emily returned, triumphantly holding a pair of black ballet flats. Mission accomplished. Clara stood up slowly and reached for the shoes. Her voice was soft but full of warmth. Thank you. You really do think of everything. Clara slipped off her broken heels with a quiet sigh and eased into the pair of flats Emily had brought. You saved me, she said softly. Always, Emily replied with a wink before disappearing back into the crowd. Nicholas was watching nearby, a smile tugging gently at the corners of his lips. Clara stood a little straighter, walked a little steadier. There, she said, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. I can return with dignity. Or, Nicholas said, offering his hand, we could dance. Clara hesitated. I don't know if I'm ready for that. We just have to make it to the center of the floor, he said. The rest, we can improvise. She looked at him, uncertain for half a second, then placed her hand in his. Okay, but if I step on your foot, I'm blaming the heel. There. They walked together toward the middle of the room, the music slowing to a gentle rhythm. Nicholas turned to her, hand outstretched once more. Clara hesitated just briefly before taking it. They began to dance. No choreography, no practiced movements, just quiet steps, shifting together as if learning how to breathe in sync. This is starting to feel like one of those movie scenes, she whispered. All that's missing is the ending. Clara laughed, but didn't reply. She just kept moving with him, closer now. Her heart felt light but anchored. Her eyes met his and didn't look away. And for the first time in a long while, nothing felt broken. Not her heel, not her confidence, maybe not even her heart. The following Monday, Clara stepped into the office with a strange feeling in her chest. Like something had changed, though she couldn't quite name it. Maybe it was the way Nicholas had looked at her when they'd said goodnight at the gala. Or the quiet memory of dancing under soft lights. Or maybe it was simply the comforting afterglow of surviving an entire formal event in borrowed shoes and borrowed courage. She tried to focus, checked emails, reviewed spreadsheets, drafted a new proposal. But every time Nicholas passed by her desk, her thoughts scattered like leaves in the wind. "He's just your boss," she muttered to herself. "A boss who dances well and compliments you like he means it, but still a boss." By the second day, Emily had clearly caught on. "You're avoiding me. It's not you, it's my brain." "Is it Nicholas?" Clara made a face. "Maybe." Did something happen after the gala? Not exactly, but everything felt close, like too close. Emily tilted her head knowingly. "You're scared." "Maybe I already like him more than I should, and maybe he doesn't feel the same." "What has he done since the party?" "Nothing. No message, no little comment, just nothing. Like none of it happened." Sometimes silence says more than we want it to. In the days that followed, Clara pulled away, not consciously but instinctively. A quiet shield rising around her. She stopped joining the team for lunch, sent reports through email instead of delivering them in person, kept her conversations with Nicholas professional, brief, and measured. And Nicholas, he noticed. Of course he did, but he didn't say anything either. Then came a rainy Thursday. The windows were streaked with water, and Clara was in a meeting room with the development team when Nicholas walked in. He gave a short presentation, updates on the company's growth, a few exciting new projects. Everyone listened politely. Then, near the end, his tone shifted. "But none of this," he said, "would be possible without a team that values simplicity and people who see things differently." Clara looked up. He was looking right at her. Taking a chance on someone who didn't quite fit the mold turned out to be the best decision we've made this year. And it's something we plan to keep doing. Applause followed. Clara sat still. The words echoed in her mind long after the clapping faded. After the meeting, Emily slipped beside her and whispered, "That was for you." And everyone in the room knew it. Clara swallowed, but he didn't say my name. He didn't have to. It sounded like praise. It was praise. But still, it felt unfinished. Clara didn't know what to do with public recognition that left her feeling seen but somehow still uncertain. And then, just as if the universe wasn't done writing her story yet, as if the universe hadn't tangled things enough, that very afternoon Clara received an email, an invitation to speak at a conference in another city. She'd been selected to lead a panel on simplifying innovation, representing Lunaris Innovations. The invitation had already been approved by the board and by Nicholas. Clara walked into his office holding the printed email like it weighed more than it should. "You knew about this?" she asked. Nicholas looked up. "I did. I thought it'd be a great opportunity for you. It's a full week away. You won't just be representing the company," he said gently. "You'll be representing everything you've built here, yourself." Clara hesitated. Her voice was quiet. "Is this your way of pushing me away?" Nicholas looked genuinely taken aback. "Of course not. Why would you think that?" "Because," she said, her eyes on the floor, "we haven't really talked since the gala, and everything feels different." There was a pause, the kind that stretches into something unspoken. "I just thought you needed space," he said finally. "And I thought maybe you'd changed your mind about everything." "I didn't," Nicholas said. "I just wasn't sure how to move forward without crossing a line, without pressuring you." Clara nodded slowly. "Maybe I do need this trip, just to think." "If you decide to go," Nicholas replied, "you'll have our full support." She walked out of his office with too many thoughts and not enough answers. The next morning, Clara confirmed the trip, and for the rest of the week she did what she did best. She focused. She led panels, shared ideas, spoke on stages under bright lights. She received compliments, exchanged business cards, and was even invited to join new collaborative projects. But no matter how well things went, there was something missing. Or rather, someone. Every time she got applause, she thought, Nicholas would have smiled at that. Every time she saw something quietly funny, she thought, I wish I could tell him about this. She didn't message him. He didn't message her. But every day she checked her phone, hoping. On the last day of the trip, Emily called her on video. I need to give you a quick update. Clara raised an eyebrow. Is something wrong? Nicholas, Emily said. He's intense, like more serious than usual, focused. Quiet, kind of like a human spreadsheet. Clara frowned. That's not because of me. It is. You left and everyone noticed. But it's just a work trip. Exactly, Emily replied, and the entire office feels off without you. Clara was quiet. Then softly, what if I come back and nothing's changed? Then you deal with it, Emily said. But at least you'll know you tried. Clara hung up and turned toward the hotel window. The city outside was beautiful, bright, alive. But it felt too far from what really mattered. That Monday, Clara returned. She stepped into the building with steady feet and a pounding heart. The elevator felt slower than usual, like it too had questions. On her floor, she was met with hugs, warm smiles, and a few light-hearted jokes. The company was too quiet without you, one colleague said. I didn't think I made that much noise. It was the good kind. When Clara reached her desk, there was an envelope waiting. A folded note inside, written in clean, familiar handwriting. You were missed. N. She held the paper for a few seconds, then folded it carefully and slipped it into her notebook. For a moment, she thought about going straight to his office. Instead, she sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and took a deep breath. Work. Focus. One step at a time. But something caught her eye on the company calendar. A meeting had been scheduled, unexpectedly. Alignment meeting. Creative direction attendees. Clara Wynne, Nicholas Hale, a one-on-one with the CEO, on a random Tuesday. No warning. She frowned. It wasn't common, and it wasn't routine. Clara stood up and made her way to the meeting room. When she opened the door, Nicholas was already there, seated at the table with 2 cups of coffee. He looked up with a calm, quiet smile. Hi, Clara, he said. Take a seat for a moment. Clara sat down slowly, still a little wary. This doesn't feel like a regular meeting, she said. That's because it's not, Nicholas replied. I just wanted to talk. She didn't answer right away, just waited. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to invite you without making it awkward, he said. Then I remembered. We've already shared lipstick mishaps, wardrobe malfunctions, and a car window reflection. So, I think we've crossed that bridge. Clara smiled. True. Nothing like adjusting your bra in front of a stranger's car to set the tone. They both laughed, the kind of laugh that comes not from comedy, but from comfort. It was strange and beautiful how time could soften even the most embarrassing moments. Nicholas's voice lowered, more earnest now. The truth is, Clara, I admire you. Not just your work, but the way you think, the way you make sense of chaos, the way you stay calm when things fall apart. And slowly, this started feeling less like admiration and more personal. She looked at him, really looked, and saw no hesitation, just sincerity. I'm not someone who opens up easily, he continued, but with you it's always felt natural, and maybe it's time I stopped overthinking. Clara took a deep breath. I spent so long convincing myself that this was all just professional, that it was safer to pretend I didn't feel anything. But the silence, the distance, it wasn't because I didn't care. It was fear. Nicholas gave a small nod. Fear of what? That it was all in my head, that I was confusing kindness with affection, attention with interest. But now, I know better. She placed her hands gently on the table. No drama. Just try like you too, Nicholas. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was full of recognition, of relief, of unspoken understanding. So, he said, resting his forearms on the table, what do we do now? You're the one who makes the plans, she teased. What do you suggest? That we take it slow, but that we stop pretending nothing's happening. Clara smiled. That sounds fair. And maybe, he added, we go out to dinner, not as colleagues, not as CEO and employee, just 2 people figuring it out. As long as it's not one of those places where the menu doesn't have prices. I promise, affordable, readable menus only, she laughed, and no elevators. Deal. Before she left, Nicholas reached into his drawer and handed her a small box. Clara opened it and burst out laughing. Inside was a silver keychain shaped like a mirror. Engraved on it were the words, Warning, may contain lettuce and feelings. Is this real? Custom made, he said, smiling. I like to think of it as thoughtful branding. Clara slipped it into her bag, still smiling. Can I be honest? Always. This is the corniest and most wonderful thing I've ever received. Nicholas gave a mock bow. Mission accomplished. Clara stood up, and for a second, neither of them moved. So, now? Now we both go back to work, Nicholas said, and later I'll send you an address. No French names? CEO's honor. She left the room with a heart that felt both lighter and fuller. No grand kiss, no dramatic declarations, just honesty, and something even better, clarity. The months that followed weren't like the movies. There were no sweeping gestures, no whirlwind romance, just dinners, walks, conversations that went a little deeper each time. At the office, things stayed professional, mostly, but there were the occasional glances, quiet smiles, sticky notes that read, "Meeting at 11 a.m., bring coffee, and your smile." Or, "Lunch, bring your appetite, and that idea you mentioned yesterday." Emily, of course, knew everything, but she respected their space. Every now and then she'd glance at Clara with a smirk and whisper, "You two are subtle, but not that subtle." And Clara, she smiled too, because for the first time in a long time, her life didn't feel like a performance. It felt like hers. Everything had begun to fall into place. No more doubts, no more fear. Clara felt safe, steady, and above all, loved. Nicholas, too, seemed lighter. He still brought the same dedication to work, the same focus, but now there was a subtle shift in his gaze, a calm spark, the kind of peace only someone who's found what they were searching for can carry. Weekends became just for them. A museum here, a walk in the park there, sometimes a kitchen disaster that ended in flower-covered laughter. Other times, small victories, like successfully assembling a piece of IKEA furniture without breaking up or breaking something. Clara discovered that Nicholas could make pancakes and loved watching terrible sci-fi films, the kind with bad effects and even worse dialogue. Nicholas discovered that Clara collected mugs with silly quotes, and that she talked to herself when nervous, narrating her life like she was in a documentary. One Sunday, while they were walking hand in hand through the park, an elderly man passing by smiled at them and said, "When love is simple, it lasts longer." They didn't respond. They just smiled, because that's exactly how it felt, simple and full of meaning. A few months later, Nicholas invited Clara for a weekend away. He told her he needed to disconnect and knew just the place. Clara agreed, thinking it would be a quiet trip. She packed casual clothes, no makeup, no expectations, just peace. They arrived at a small wooden cabin nestled among tall trees, overlooking a quiet lake. The world felt slower there, calmer, like even time had taken a deep breath. On the second day, Nicholas suggested a boat ride. Clara had never been on a boat before, but she nodded and climbed in, trusting the moment. Midway across the lake, with sunlight spilling gold across the water, Nicholas stopped rowing. "It's so beautiful," Clara whispered, taking it in. Nicholas reached into his jacket. "I've been waiting for the right moment to do this." She turned, a small velvet box, deep blue, slightly trembling in his hand. "Clara, I didn't prepare a long speech," he said, voice soft, "because everything I want to say, you already know. I admire you, I respect you, and I love you more than I ever thought I was capable of loving someone. You changed the way I see everything. You taught me to laugh at myself, to loosen the grip, to believe that an ordinary life could still be extraordinary." He opened the box, a simple ring, elegant, quietly dazzling. Just enough sparkle to bring tears to her eyes. "Clara Wynne," he said, "will you marry me?" She covered her mouth with her hands, laughed, then cried. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, of course, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and there in the stillness of the lake, with no fireworks, no audience, no soundtrack but the soft hush of water, they held each other. No spectacle, just a yes. And that was everything. 3 months later, they were married. It was a small wedding on a quiet beach at sunset. Clara wore a flowing dress, her hair loose in the breeze, her smile unstoppable. Nicholas wore a crisp white shirt, calm as ever, but his eyes betrayed every emotion he was feeling. Emily was there, naturally, and she cried before the ceremony even started. Close friends, a few colleagues, and family gathered around them in a circle of warmth. It wasn't grand, but it was genuine, every detail soaked in meaning. As Clara walked toward Nicholas, she didn't think about whether she'd trip. She didn't care about the wind or the sand or the way her hair moved in the light. She only thought of one thing, that every step brought her closer to a love she never thought she deserved. Nicholas took her hands and held them tightly. "Today," he said, voice trembling, "I promise to make you laugh, even on the hard days." Clara smiled through her tears. "And I promise," she said, "to never adjust my bra in the reflection of a car window again." Laughter. A kiss. A promise not just of love, but of every messy, magical step that brought them here. The wedding reception was everything Clara had hoped for. Joyful, light-hearted, full of laughter and familiar faces. There was music, dancing, inside jokes whispered between bites of cake. Nicholas kicked off his shoes within the first 15 minutes, and Clara received a brand new mug, white ceramic with gold lettering that read, "Lady of the Mirror and the Lettuce." She laughed so hard she nearly spilled her drink. Later that night, they ran toward the ocean, hand in hand, barefoot, letting the waves brush against their feet, because that's how they'd always done things. Playfully, with a little bit of chaos and just enough adventure. A few months later, Clara was waiting in the living room, nerves quietly simmering beneath her smile. She heard the door unlock. Nicholas stepped in, tired but relaxed. "I got you something," she said, standing up holding out a small wrapped package. He raised an eyebrow, amused. "Should I be nervous?" "Maybe just a little." He opened it slowly, curious. Inside was a soft gray t-shirt, simple, understated, but across the chest were 4 words that stopped him cold. "Dad in training." Nicholas looked up at her, his hands frozen. "Really?" Clara nodded, eyes shining with quiet tears. 2 months. He pulled her into his arms instantly, burying his face in her shoulder. Then he laughed. Then he cried. Then he laughed again. "You're serious?" he whispered, pulling back slightly. "You're not joking?" "I'm not," Clara said softly. "There's a little heartbeat in here. Half mine, half yours." Nicholas knelt slightly, resting one hand over her still flat belly. He kissed her forehead, then the space just below it, then the curve where new life had begun. This is the best gift of my life," he said. "Better than pancakes. So much better." They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms as the world quieted around them. No grand announcements, no perfect words. Just love, and one tiny heartbeat. What did you think of Clara and Nicholas's story? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Rate the story from 0 to 10. What's your score? And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to follow more stories like this one. For more emotional, heartwarming journeys, click right here on the final screen. Thank you for watching. We hope this story found a quiet place in your heart.